Arthur Pruitt, a name synonymous with fine produce in Chicago's Gold Coast, hated pears. Not the taste, mind you, but the symbol. The Pruitt family legacy was built on them. The perfectly ripened golden-skinned Bartlett pears that arrived each fall, shipped directly from their orchard in Oregon. They were the cornerstone of Pruitt & Sons, the high-end grocery store that had been in Arthur's family for 3 generations. Arthur, however, wanted to sell algorithms, not fruit. His grandfather, a gruff man who smelled perpetually of damp earth and pear brandy, had instilled in him the Pruitt work ethic. Dawn till dusk, 7 days a week, every pear inspected, every customer greeted with a forced smile. His father, a gentler soul who died too young, had simply maintained the status quo, a quiet resignation etched on his face. Now, at 28, Arthur was trapped. The weight of tradition pressed down on him like a crate of overripe comas. He stood in his small, impeccably organized apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, the skyline a glittering testament to the innovation he craved. On his laptop, lines of code danced across the screen, a potential breakthrough in predictive market analysis. In the kitchen, a basket of, you guessed it, pears sat untouched. His phone buzzed. It was Beatrice, his mother. "Arthur, darling," her voice dripped with concern. "Mr. Henderson is here. He wants to discuss the holiday pear baskets. And, well, he mentioned something about the quality being slightly inconsistent this year." Arthur sighed. "I'll be there in 20. The truth was, Arthur had been neglecting the pears. His mind was elsewhere, in the binary world of possibilities, where the future wasn't dictated by the cyclical nature of fruit harvests. Pruitt & Sons was a time capsule, polished mahogany shelves, brass fixtures, and a clientele that seemed to have stepped out of a Fitzgerald novel. The only modern touch was the credit card machine, which even then felt like a betrayal. Mr. Henderson, a man whose tweed suit looked like it had been grown, not tailored, was indeed waiting. He held a pear in his hand, turning it over as if it were a flawed diamond. "Arthur," he said, his voice a low rumble, "this pear, it lacks joie de vivre." Arthur wanted to laugh, but he knew Mr. Henderson was dead serious. "I apologize, sir. We've had some logistical challenges." "Logistical challenges?" "Arthur, these are Pruitt pears. They should sing with perfection." Beatrice, ever the diplomat, stepped in. "Arthur is just under a bit of stress, Mr. Henderson. He's been working so hard." She shot Arthur a look that could curdle milk. Arthur knew what she meant. "Get your act together. This is your legacy." He spent the rest of the day sorting pears, feeling the sticky sweetness on his hands, the weight of expectation on his shoulders. He couldn't escape it. Pruitt & Sons was his gilded cage. Enter Clara. She arrived at Pruitt & Sons like a storm cloud in a sea of polite smiles. She was a consultant hired by Beatrice to modernize the store. Clara was everything Arthur wasn't: brash, confident, and utterly indifferent to the Pruitt family history. Her first act was to suggest replacing the mahogany shelves with sleek, minimalist displays. Arthur nearly choked on his afternoon pear. "Mahogany is part of our brand," he protested. Clara, who had bright pink hair and a nose ring, raised an eyebrow. "Your brand is old money with a penchant for overpriced fruit. We need to appeal to a younger demographic." Arthur and Clara clashed from the start. He saw her as a disruptive force, a mercenary who didn't understand the soul of the store. She saw him as a dinosaur, clinging to outdated traditions. Their meetings were a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare. Arthur would subtly undermine her suggestions, pointing out the impracticality of her ideas. Clara would roll her eyes and speak to him as if he were a particularly slow child. But beneath the animosity, something else simmered. Arthur found himself drawn to Clara's energy, her unapologetic attitude. He admired her ability to challenge the status quo, even if it meant disrupting his own comfortable world. Clara, for her part, seemed intrigued by Arthur's quiet intensity, his hidden intelligence. She saw the frustration in his eyes, the yearning for something more. One evening, after a particularly grueling meeting, they found themselves alone in the store. The last of the customers had left, and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerators. "So," Clara said, leaning against a stack of unsold persimmons, "are you going to fire me or what?" Arthur hesitated. "I don't have the authority." "But you want to?" "I don't know what I want," he admitted. Clara smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed her face. "That's the problem, isn't it?" They stood in silence for a moment, the tension palpable. Then, Clara reached out and plucked a pear from the display. She held it out to Arthur. "Take a bite," she said. He looked at the pear, then at Clara. He took a bite. It was perfectly ripe, sweet, and juicy. "Not bad," he said. "Not bad at all," she agreed. Their reluctant truce turned into an unlikely friendship. They spent hours discussing the store, arguing about marketing strategies, and debating the merits of organic versus conventional farming. Arthur learned that Clara was a self-made woman, a product of the foster care system, who had clawed her way to success. She had a sharp mind and a fierce determination, and she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Clara learned that Arthur was more than just a privileged heir. He was intelligent, sensitive, and deeply conflicted. He had a passion for coding, a love of literature, and a hidden desire to break free from his family's expectations. One rainy afternoon, Clara suggested they visit the Pruitt family orchards in Oregon. "You need to see where the pears come from," she said. "It might give you a new perspective." Arthur was hesitant. He hadn't been to the orchards in years, but he found himself agreeing. He needed a change of scenery, a break from the suffocating atmosphere of Pruitt and Sons. The orchards were vast and beautiful, rows upon rows of pear trees stretching as far as the eye could see. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of damp earth and ripening fruit. As they walked through the orchard, Arthur began to open up. He told Clara about his grandfather, his father, and the weight of the Pruitt family legacy. He told her about his dreams of starting his own tech company, his fears of disappointing his mother. Clara listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and support. She didn't judge him or try to fix him. She simply accepted him for who he was. That night, they stayed in a small cabin on the edge of the orchard. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain patter against the roof. Then, Clara turned to Arthur and said, "You know, you don't have to be your grandfather." Arthur looked at her, confused. "You don't have to spend your life selling pears if it doesn't make you happy," she continued. "You can choose your own path." Arthur had never heard anyone say those words out loud. He had always assumed that he was trapped, that his destiny was predetermined. "But what about my mother?" he said. "What about the store?" "Your mother loves you," Clara said. "She wants you to be happy. And the store, well, the store can survive without you." Arthur knew she was right, but it was still hard to let go of the guilt, the obligation. Clara reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm and comforting. "It's okay to be scared," she said, "but you can't let fear control your life." They sat there, holding hands, until the fire died down to embers. The idyllic escape couldn't last. Back in Chicago, reality hit. Beatrice was furious. "Oregon? With her? Arthur, what were you thinking?" Mr. Henderson called, complaining about the unacceptable quality of the latest shipment of pears. And Clara's marketing ideas, once seen as innovative, were now deemed too radical by the Pruitt and Sons clientele. The pressure mounted, and Arthur began to crack. He snapped at Clara, retreated into a shell, and spent his nights coding in a desperate attempt to escape. One evening, Clara found him hunched over his laptop, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. "Arthur," she said softly, "what's going on?" He didn't look up. "I can't do this," he said. "I can't run the store, I can't start my company, and I can't be the man you want me to be." Clara sat down beside him and took his hand. "I don't want you to be anyone but yourself," she said. But you have to choose. You can't keep trying to be everything to everyone. Arthur pulled his hand away. It's not that simple, he said. You don't understand. Then help me understand, Clara pleaded. Arthur exploded. You wouldn't understand. You didn't grow up with this pressure, this expectation. You don't know what it's like to have your entire life planned out for you. Clara recoiled, her eyes filled with hurt. You're right, she said. I don't. I thought I was helping, but I guess I was just being naive. She stood up and walked out, leaving Arthur alone in the darkness. He knew he had messed up. He had let his fears and insecurities get the better of him, and he had pushed away the one person who truly cared about him. He spent the next few days in a daze, going through the motions at the store, avoiding Clara's calls. He felt like a failure, a fraud. Then, one morning, he received a letter from his mother. It was a letter his father had written shortly before his death, a letter Beatrice had kept hidden for years. In the letter, his father wrote about his own struggles with the Pruitt family legacy. He admitted that he had never truly loved the store, that he had always felt trapped by its expectations. Arthur, he wrote, I want you to know that you don't have to live my life. You have the right to choose your own path, to follow your own dreams. Don't let the weight of tradition crush you. Be true to yourself. Arthur read the letter over and over again, tears streaming down his face. He realized that he had been living his life for everyone else, neglecting his own needs and desires. He knew what he had to do. He found Clara at her apartment, packing her bags. I'm leaving, she said. I can't stay here anymore. I know, Arthur said. I'm sorry. Clara looked at him, her expression guarded. What do you want, Arthur? I want you, he said. But I also want to be true to myself. He told her about the letter from his father, about his decision to pursue his passion for coding. He told her that he was going to sell his share of Pruitt and Sons to his cousin, who had always loved the store. Clara listened without interrupting. When he was finished, she said, What about your mother? I'll talk to her, Arthur said. I think she'll understand. He did talk to his mother, and to his surprise, she was supportive. She had seen how unhappy he was, and she realized that he needed to find his own path. With his future uncertain, but finally his own, Arthur turned back to Clara. So, he said, Are you staying? Clara smiled. Only if you promise to teach me how to code. Arthur laughed. It's a deal. He didn't become a tech billionaire overnight. There were setbacks, failures, and moments of doubt. But he persevered, driven by his passion and supported by Clara's unwavering belief in him. He never completely escaped the Pruitt family legacy. He still received holiday pear baskets from his cousin every year, and he occasionally visited the store, marveling at its timeless charm. But he was no longer defined by it. He had found his own way, his own purpose. He had learned that the price of pears was not worth sacrificing his own happiness. Years later, Arthur and Clara stood in their small but vibrant office space, the hum of servers replacing the gentle clang of Pruitt and Sons. Their company, Orchard Analytics, was a success, using data to predict consumer trends with a surprising focus on seasonal fruit. You know, Clara said, watching Arthur fine-tune an algorithm, sometimes I miss those mahogany shelves. Arthur chuckled. Don't get any ideas. We're sticking with sleek, minimalist displays. He paused, a thoughtful look on his face. Although maybe we could offer a complimentary pear with every data subscription. Clara rolled her eyes, but a smile played on her lips. The past was never truly gone, but it no longer defined them. They had built their own orchard, a place where tradition and innovation could coexist, where the price of freedom was a risk worth taking. And sometimes, just sometimes, a perfectly ripe pear could remind them of where they came from and how far they had traveled together. Orchard Analytics was booming, their algorithms accurately predicting everything from avocado toast trends to the resurgence of artisanal mayonnaise. Arthur, coding away, found a rhythm he never thought possible, within the confines of his old life. Clara, ever the firebrand, secured a deal with a national supermarket chain. Things were, dare they say, good. Then came the Pears. It started subtly. Arthur noticed a bizarre anomaly in their data, a sudden inexplicable surge in demand for obscure pear varieties from the early 20th century. Pears like the Seckel and the Winter Nellis, pears nobody had cared about for decades. It's just a blip, Clara said, waving it off. Some hipster food blogger probably discovered them. But the blip grew into a surge. Orders flooded in from niche grocers, online retailers. Even wait for it. Pruitt and Sons. Arthur, ever the suspicious analyst, dug deeper. He discovered a series of cryptic online forums buzzing with talk of Project Pomona, referencing a secret society dedicated to preserving the true essence of pears. This is getting weird, he muttered, showing Clara the forum. They're talking about ancient pear rituals and unlocking the pear's hidden potential? Clara burst out laughing. You're telling me, after escaping a legacy of selling fruit, you've stumbled into a pear conspiracy? But Arthur wasn't laughing. The more he investigated, the more unsettling things became. He found coded messages hidden within antique fruit crate labels, references to a shadowy figure known only as the Pear Emperor. Then came the break-in. One night, Arthur returned to their office to find the place ransacked. Not for cash or computers, but for pear-related data. The hard drive containing their historical pear demand database was gone. They're after the algorithm, Arthur realized, his voice tight. They want to control the pear market. Okay, this is officially insane, Clara said, but the color had drained from her face. Arthur called his cousin, who now ran Pruitt and Sons. Has anything unusual happened at the store lately? Unusual. His cousin sounded flustered. Well, we did get a visit from a very intense group of pear enthusiasts. They were asking about our historical sourcing records. And, they paid in cash. A lot of cash. Arthur hung up, his mind racing. He knew he had to stop them. But how do you fight a secret society of pear fanatics? Their investigation led them to an abandoned orchard outside of Chicago, overgrown and eerily silent. It was there, in a crumbling barn, that they found the headquarters of Project Pomona. Inside, robed figures chanted in Latin around a makeshift altar piled high with rare pear varieties. At the head of a table sat a man in a golden crown made of pear blossoms. The Pear Emperor, Arthur whispered. The Emperor, a gaunt man with wild eyes, raised his hands. Behold, the future of pears. With this algorithm, we shall restore the pear to its rightful place as the supreme fruit of the world. Arthur and Clara exchanged a look. This was even crazier than they thought. Excuse me, Arthur said, stepping forward, but I think you have something that belongs to us. The Emperor turned, his gaze piercing. You dare interrupt the sacred ritual? You, the descendant of those who have defiled the pear's purity. Defiled? Arthur raised an eyebrow. We were just trying to sell them at a reasonable price. Lies, the Emperor shrieked. You have diluted the pear's essence, catering to the masses with your tasteless hybrids. We shall reclaim the pear's true potential, unlocking its psychoactive properties. Clara choked back a laugh. Psychoactive properties? Are you serious? The Emperor ignored her. Seize them. The robed figures lunged. Arthur, surprisingly agile, dodged the first attack. Clara, never one to back down from a fight, kicked one of the cultists in the shins. A chaotic brawl ensued, a bizarre mix of ancient rituals and modern-day self-defense. Arthur managed to grab the hard drive containing their algorithm. Let's get out of here, he shouted, pulling Clara toward the door. They raced through the orchard, pursued by the Pear Emperor and his zealous followers. They reached their car and sped away, leaving the cultists in their dust. Back in the safety of their office, Arthur and Clara tried to make sense of what had happened. Psychoactive pears, Clara said. shaking her head. "I can't believe this is my life." Arthur, however, was starting to see a connection. The ancient pear varieties, the coded messages, the emperor's obsession, it all pointed to one thing: a long-lost legend about a rare pear that could unlock heightened senses and altered states of consciousness. "It's just a myth," Clara said. "Right." Arthur wasn't so sure. He remembered his grandfather, the one who smelled of pear brandy. Had he known something about the true essence of pears? Had he been protecting it all along? He decided to visit his mother, Beatrice. "Mother," he said, "do you know anything about a pear with special properties?" Beatrice looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of amusement and concern. "Arthur, darling, you've been spending too much time with that woman. You're starting to sound as crazy as she is." But then she hesitated. "There was a story your grandfather used to tell about a pear that grew only in the oldest orchard, a pear so potent that it could, well, let's just say it could open your mind." Arthur's heart pounded. "Where is it? Does it still exist?" Beatrice shook her head. "The old orchard was destroyed years ago, during the war. The pear was lost forever." But Arthur wasn't convinced. He knew there was more to the story. He pressed his mother, asking about his grandfather's secret stash of pear brandy. Finally, Beatrice relented. She led him to the basement, to a hidden room behind the wine cellar. There, in a dusty crate, were a few bottles of his grandfather's special reserve. "He only drank it on special occasions," Beatrice said. "He said it helped him see things more clearly." Arthur took a bottle and uncorked it. The aroma was intoxicating, a blend of ripe pears, honey, and something else, something almost otherworldly. He took a sip. The world around him shimmered, colors intensified, sounds sharpened. He felt a surge of energy, a clarity of thought he had never experienced before. He closed his eyes and saw the old orchard, the secret pear tree, a hidden chamber beneath the roots. He opened his eyes, his heart racing. He knew where to find the pear. Arthur and Clara returned to the abandoned orchard, armed with Arthur's newfound knowledge. They followed the clues, deciphering the coded messages, navigating the overgrown paths. Finally, they found it, a hidden entrance beneath the roots of an ancient pear tree. Inside, a small chamber contained a single, perfectly preserved pear. "The legendary pear," Clara whispered. Arthur reached out and touched it. He felt a surge of power, a connection to the past. But then they heard a noise. The pear emperor had followed them. "You cannot escape me," he shouted, lunging toward them. "The pear is mine." A struggle ensued. Arthur, fueled by the pear brandy, fought with a ferocity he didn't know he possessed. Clara, as always, held her own, kicking and scratching. Finally, Arthur managed to disarm the emperor. He held the legendary pear in his hand, its power coursing through his veins. "What are you going to do?" Clara asked. Arthur looked at the pear, then at the emperor, then at Clara. He made a decision. He raised the pear high above his head and took a bite. The world exploded in a kaleidoscope of colors and sensations. He saw the past, the present, and the future all at once. He understood the true essence of pears, their connection to the earth, their power to heal and inspire. And then he understood what he had to do. He took the remaining pear and offered it to the emperor. "Here," he said, "taste it." The emperor hesitated, then took a bite. His eyes widened, his face transformed. He saw the truth, the futility of his obsession. He dropped to his knees, weeping. "What have I done?" Arthur and Clara helped him up. They led him out of the orchard, back into the world. The pear emperor, now reformed, became an advocate for sustainable agriculture, promoting the responsible cultivation of pears. Project Pomona was disbanded, its members finding new, less crazy ways to express their love for fruit. Arthur and Clara continued to run orchard analytics, but with a newfound sense of purpose. They used their data to help small farmers, to promote biodiversity, to ensure that everyone had access to fresh, healthy food. And every year, they returned to the abandoned orchard, planting new pear trees, nurturing the soil, and honoring the legacy of a legendary pear. One day, Clara turned to Arthur and said, "You know, I think we finally found our orchard." Arthur smiled. "Yes," he said, "and this time we're selling more than just pears." Did Arthur's journey resonate with you? Leave a comment below telling us what you're passionate about and what's holding you back. Let's create a supportive community to inspire each other to chase our dreams.